All right, let's talk about this law school admission cycle because a lot of people are freaking out for no reason. You've probably seen the big scary headlines that applicants are up 25% year over year. They're up 50% over the past 2 years, and this is the most competitive cycle ever. And it's true that applicants are up, but people are missing the part that actually matters, the LSAT score distribution. And that part is way less scary than the headlines make it seem. Let me explain this in the simplest way possible. Think of it like you're going to a restaurant and you see a massive line outside, and so you assume you're not getting a table. But then you realize everyone in line is waiting for the patio, and inside it's basically empty. That is what this cycle is like. Everyone's looking at the big, scary applicant numbers, but when you look at where applicants are actually scoring, it's not nearly as bad. Most LSAT score ranges aren't blowing up. The middle, the 150s and 160s, isn't nearly as crowded as last year. And there is a tiny spike in applicants scoring above 175, but that always happens early in this cycle and typically disappears by January. And so the people you're actually competing with, there aren't suddenly way more of them. So let me break it down by score range without drowning you in the numbers. If you're scoring in the 150s, this is actually a pretty good year for you because competition here is growing the least. If you can get a few points more on your LSAT, it can completely change your admission cycle. If you're scoring in the 160s, this was a disaster zone last year, but this year it's way more normal. If you can get just a tiny score bump, it's going to make a massive difference. And if you're scoring 170 or above, you're going to be fine. That little early season spike always ends up flattening out. And so if you're scoring in the low 170s, a retake is definitely still worth it. And if you're in the mid 170s, you're already in great shape. And of course, the new LSAT format will help you a great deal as well. As you may know, there are no more logic games on the LSAT. They've replaced it with a second score logical reasoning section, and the new LSAT format is easier to study. It's more predictable and it's more learnable, more coachable. And so if you're considering an LSAT retake in January or February, definitely worth it. I always say better to apply a bit later with a higher LSAT score than earlier with a lower LSAT score. And if you're worried that applicants are up, will that make your chances worse? Yeah, it's certainly not going to help, of course, but law schools are always looking first and foremost at the LSAT medians, the median LSAT score that they're looking to target to raise their status in the US News rankings. And so if your score is final and strong, if you're already set, I recommend applying now if you haven't yet already. Applying early will still help you with getting scholarship money and getting into better law schools. And if you're considering a retake, I always say go for it if you have time to study. If you can take it in January, February, it's still going to help you, not too late. And you do want to build a smart school list, of course, a couple of reach schools, a couple of target schools, and a couple of safety schools. Always take a few more shots at higher ranked schools because, hey, why not? You want to maximize your options. And of course, this cycle isn't even halfway over. Score bands shift every single month. Schools are constantly adjusting, and wait lists activity still moves later and later in the cycle. Most people give up way too soon. Don't let that be you. And so the good news here, if I had to summarize it, is that your competition isn't exploding the way total applicant numbers have. Your LSAT score still has a great deal of power. Retaking still works. Strategy, as always, still matters. And you can change your entire cycle odds between now and the test in February. While this cycle is competitive, it's not the apocalypse people are making it out to be. You've still got a lot of control, and you can absolutely make this cycle work in your favor. You've got this. So hopefully I don't sound too bad. As you may know, I'm getting over a cold. Apologies if you joined yesterday and I wasn't here. I'm back now. I've got a couple of mugs of tea next to me. Hopefully that'll help me out if I need a little refresher here. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat. I'm happy to address any questions as they come up. I see a couple popping in here already. Happy to get to them as I'm able. So just drop in the chat any questions at all on LSAT and law school admissions, and I will get to as many of those as I can, and I'll stay on for as long as I can as well. I see some coming in already. Thanks for dropping those in here. Armani's asking, what if you have a high LSAT but a low GPA? Then you're going to be a so-called splitter applicant, which is totally fine. Law schools love splitters. They actually weigh LSAT scores more heavily than undergraduate GPA anyway. And so better to have a high LSAT and a low GPA than a high GPA and a low LSAT. And if you want to get your LSAT even higher than high, of course, you could retake. So feel free to ask any questions about your retake prep if you are considering a retake. So I'm just banging my mugs together here, trying to lower the AC so I can get a bit more air flowing in here. Utah is saying, y'all got me a 168 in November, 143 to 168 in 4 months. Congratulations, Utah. That's an incredible increase, 25 points. Love to see it. I mean, what would you say made the biggest difference for you in achieving that increase? I know a lot of folks would kill for that kind of increase in their LSAT. But yeah, congrats regardless. So Utah is saying the tutoring made the biggest difference. Awesome. Love to see that. Glad the tutoring helped you out. I always say that, the best way to prep is one-on-one support if you can swing it. And by the way, speaking of that, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to everybody out there watching this. Link below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube as well, and link in my bio on TikTok or Instagram if you're watching there, of course. Open offer to anybody out there studying for the LSAT, whether you're taking it in January, February, April, June, or beyond. I'm happy to help you out with your prep, help you craft a personal plan of attack for whenever you're taking the LSAT, whether it's your first time, whether you're retaking. Happy to support you on your LSAT journey. Armani's asking, trying to figure out being a 30-year-old Navy vet, how can I maximize the application process? So first off, Armani, thank you for your service. I'm happy to help you out. I mean, first I would say, don't hide that background, celebrate it, talk about it in your application essays, your personal statement, your diversity statement, any optional essays, addenda, letters of rec. Highlight your experience in the service, talk about it in your essays, what you learned from it in terms of responsibility, persistence, dedication, motivation. Law school's tough, and law school admission officers know that, and so they want to know folks are not going to give up. And having served in the military, of course, you probably have some experience with not giving up and persisting. And so highlight those qualities and those characteristics in your applications, and law schools will certainly appreciate that. Steven's asking, do I have to go to law school to take the LSAT? It's kind of the reverse or the opposite in a way, like you've got to take the LSAT to go to law school. And that's not technically 100%. There are some folks who get in without the LSAT, but for the most part, the LSAT is the main game in town. It's the best way to maximize your odds of getting in. It shows them that you're serious about pursuing law as a degree in particular, and that you're not going for this just based on a whim or for lack of a better option. And so law schools typically want to see your LSAT score, your GPA, and then your application essays all as additional factors. And so the best way to maximize your odds of getting in is by getting the highest possible LSAT score and applying with the highest possible GPA as well. And of course, your GPA is probably pretty fixed in time at this point. If you're watching this now, you've probably already taken the LSAT. You've probably already maximized your GPA. You've probably already finished undergrad. If not, you're close to finishing it. But your LSAT score is going to be the biggest way for you to maximize your odds at this stage. And so, of course, talk about your any relevant law school related experience, any legal experience in your application if you can. If you've worked as a paralegal, of course, talk about that. If you have volunteered in a legal capacity, talk about that. You don't need to have that kind of experience though, but it certainly helps. But first and foremost, get the strongest possible LSAT score to maximize your odds. User 3049 is asking, should I finish my application before graduating from undergrad? You don't need to. If you want to apply to law school directly from undergrad, of course, I would recommend you submit your application now so that you can start law school in approximately 8 months. But you don't need to if you want to get some work experience first. That's totally fine as well. But I'd be thinking about locking down the LSAT while you're still in academic mindset, when you're in academic mode, for lack of a better word. And I see here that you're taking the LSAT in June. That's great. You've got approximately 6 months between now and then. And so think about what can you do over these next 6 months to maximize your odds of getting in. with the highest possible LSAT score. And so, what kind of LSAT prep are you doing right now? Are you looking into support options like courses or coaching or textbooks or webinars? How do you learn best? A lot of folks will start off getting a textbook like a hand me down and realizing that it's not really enough. And so they're looking for additional support. I see here that you got a couple of books on logical reasoning in particular. That's good, of course. But if you find that it's not really clicking and it's not helping you get to your goal, then you might look for some additional resources like courses and coaching. And of course, we offer that kind of support at LSAT Unplugged. And if you want to talk through your options for your prep, you can book that free LSAT tutoring lesson with me personally. I'll talk you through your situation, help you craft a plan of attack. Links in my bio on TikTok, below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube as well, unpluggedprep.com/start. I'll be happy to help you out. And typically we divide LSAT prep into three phases: accuracy, pacing, and endurance. Accuracy is drilling questions by type to better understand the proper perspective from which to view each section and each question type. Then you have pacing, doing individual sections to work on how you allocate your time over the course of the exam so that you're not getting bogged down, that you're not getting stuck, that you can keep making steady forward progress. And then you have exams and endurance, doing full-length timed exams to work on your stamina so that test day itself becomes like just another run through. I can give more personalized advice, of course, if you book that free call with me, and then we can also look at where you're at now relative to where you want to be. And so you said that you want a 170, but I don't know where you're at right now. If you're at a 150, that's going to be very different than if you're at a 120. And if you're at a 165, of course, even better. But we can talk through your plan and craft an action plan for you. Jordan's got a question here asking, where should I highlight my work experience the most in? Resume clearly, but when it comes to the essays, should I focus on my why? At 25, I worked at the DA's office and currently at the U.S. Attorney's. That is fantastic work experience, Jordan. I love to see it. That's amazing. Well done. And so in your essay, you could give some sort of, say, personal anecdote or story or experience about your time in the DA's office and at the U.S. Attorney's. Any stories you can share that really make it come to life more. You don't want to just laundry list your resume. You want to give some concrete specifics on your work experience that highlights why you want to go to law school in particular. What are your motivations, any obstacles you faced, any challenges you faced in your work so far, and then why you want to go to law school and what kind of change you want to make as a result of becoming an attorney, any particular practice areas that you want to work in. And the more you can highlight and tie your goals to what you've done, the more compelling, real, and actionable your plans will seem. So I hope that helps. Armani's asking, how do you start studying for the LSAT if you're a total beginner? Well, one thing you could do is take a practice test. On lsac.org, they offer several free practice tests in the current LSAT format. You get 4 of them for free. Then you get more if you get their Law Hub Advantage subscription for roughly $120 a year. You get access to all 59 numbered exams, 101 through 159 in the current LSAT format. So you could take one, see where you stand, and then craft an action plan based on that. I always recommend taking it strictly timed under real-world test day conditions. So no extra breaks, no checking your phone. You're doing 2 sections back to back, taking a 10-minute break, then doing 2 more sections back to back, and that's the sitting. Then you see where you're at relative to your goals. And so if you're at a 140 and you want a 170, you know you've got a 30-point increase or difference to make there. Then you decide, okay, well, how much time can I put in per day and per week? And when do I want to take the LSAT considering my goal? So if you want to take it, say, in 1 month to improve 30 points, I'll be honest, that's a bit of an uphill battle. But if you give yourself, say, 4 months for April or 6 months for June, a lot more doable. If you do want to knock it out in 1 month between now and January, of course, that's going to require a more intensive boot camp style approach, which is something we offer, by the way. And so you can book that free LSAT tutoring lesson with me if you want to talk through your situation. Happy to help you craft that action plan. One thing I'll say in terms of what not to do is don't do the old prep test books available on Amazon because they don't reflect the modern LSAT format. They're outdated. They're an artifact of back when the LSAT was offered in person, but it no longer is. And so for that reason, I recommend always prepping like you're going to take it. And so since the LSAT is online, study online. don't get textbooks when you're taking an online LSAT. So the best way to study is typically going to be more like online courses and online tutoring or coaching where you can get more personal feedback in the actual LSAT format. That's typically what I'm going to recommend. If you are a little bit early in the process, if you have more like a year or 2 years to study for the LSAT, then of course, different story. You could do some non-LSAT prep or pre-LSAT prep. Like for example, there's a great book called A Rule Book for Arguments that is not LSAT specific, but it exposes you to a lot of the LSAT types of reasoning that you will see on the exam. So you might want to look into that. Again, A Rule Book for Arguments is the resource, and you might want to look into that if you've got a longer timeline. Otherwise, I do recommend studying specifically with LSAT specific materials. Just scanning through here, I see a ton of other questions in the chat. I'll try to get to many of these as I can. And if you joined the other day and I wasn't able to get to your question, just feel free to ask it again, and I'll try to get to it now. I'll get to as many questions as I can and stay on for as long as I can. So I'm graduating. Here's one. I'm graduating in December of 2026, trying to be accepted before then and get a 170. Okay, so if you're graduating in December of next year, you've got a full year before your graduation and you want to get into law school before then. So let me think here. If you're graduating in December of 2026, that would mean that you maybe want to start law school in the spring, like you're starting halfway through the year. There are some schools that do offer spring admission, but that's the exception rather than the rule. You might be applying too early if you're only graduating a semester early. You can take the LSAT now and get your 170 though, but you might have a little bit of a gap between graduating and starting law school. And I see here, okay, you're starting law school in August of 2027 is your goal, so then that's totally fine. I would say you want to take the LSAT sometime between now and the summer, let's say, get your 170, then you want to apply next fall and start law school a year after that. That timeline totally works, totally doable. And I think it's great that you're planning ahead. Tom is not a robot is asking, what's a realistic goal score for a splitter? So the fact that you're a splitter doesn't really dictate what is realistic in terms of LSAT because they're two different things, right? I'll say it this way. Because you are a splitter, you should set a higher goal because you've got to offset a relatively lower GPA. If you were not a splitter and your GPA was high, then you would not need as high of an LSAT score because your GPA would carry you a bit. Because your GPA is, to be frank, it's going to hurt you rather than help you. You're going to want to aim for a higher LSAT score to compensate. So I'm going to recommend, as always, aiming for the highest possible LSAT score. I recommend a 180. No reason to ever shoot for anything less. In other words, aim for the highest possible LSAT score no matter what, but especially if you are a splitter. And then as for specifics, we look at the schools that you're targeting. And we consider, okay, what schools are you targeting relative to your goal, relative to where you're at right now? And then we set an action plan. So if your GPA is below a 3.0, then maybe you want to have a 170 plus to compensate. Got another question here from Armani asking, have you ever seen a super splitter get into a T20 or T14? Yeah, I have. And so for those who aren't aware, a T20 would be a top 20 school, T14 would be a top 14 school. The top 14 and top 20 are the highest ranked schools in the US News rankings. So those are like for lack of a better term, they're kind of like the Ivy League of law schools like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, Cornell, NYU, and so on. And so if you want to aim for the top of the top, you want to have the highest possible numbers. And again, of course, the lower your GPA, the higher the LSAT score to compensate. And so, Lauren, to answer your question, a splitter is somebody with a low GPA who has a higher LSAT score to compensate or balance it out. And then a reverse splitter is somebody with a lower LSAT score and a relatively higher GPA. Redemption's asking, are they offering the LSAT in the summer? Yeah, they are. And so the LSAT's offered 8 times a year. Typically, it's going to be January, February, April, June, August, September, October, and November. So those have been the 8 LSAT administrations over the past several years. And so Probably that's going to be what they're kind of settling on going forward, is my guess. I can't promise that, of course. They will announce the upcoming LSAT dates in the spring, and then that will let us all better plan for what we're going to do going forward. But I would guess they're probably going to, we know for a fact they're offering it in June, and then they'll probably offer it in August as well, is my guess. Lauren's asking, what's considered a low GPA? I have a 3.74. So 3.74, all else being equal, definitely not low by any stretch, except the T14 law schools all have ridiculously high GPAs due to grade inflation. And so the T14, their GPA medians are all 3.8 to 3.9. And so you are going to unfortunately be below the GPA medians if you're applying to T14. And so you're going to want to ideally have a higher LSAT to compensate. I know it's crazy. Jordan says you're fine. And yeah, I'm sure you're going to be fine. But just looking at the hard data, the hard numbers, a 3.74 technically does put you below the T14 law school GPA medians. And so you're going to want to have a higher LSAT score to compensate. Their LSAT medians are all 170 to 174. And so you're going to want to be on the higher end of that if you are targeting the T14. If you're not targeting the T14, of course, different story. You may not need numbers that are quite as high. You've got to, of course, look at the specific schools you're targeting. Then you can make a more informed decision, and I can give you more specific advice to your situation. And of course, if you want to talk through any of this and figure out what your goals are or what your goals should be, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. Link below the video on YouTube. Link in my bio on TikTok as well. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start if you're typing it in your browser. FH is asking, what's the schedule for these lives in terms of what I typically cover each day? I mean, most of what I'm doing these days is open Q&A. And so you can always ask whatever questions are on your mind, anything at all, LSAT and law school admissions. Keep those questions coming in the chat. I'll get to as many as I can. I do typically post the schedule on YouTube at least 1 hour in advance so that you can see what the title of the talk portion is going to be. And I'm typically covering whatever's going on in the LSAT and admissions world, or whatever is coming to mind for me, just based on my recent tutoring sessions and the questions and challenges that students are bringing up. Brian's asking, will applications still be open in March? For some schools, yes. For some schools, no. Each school has their own schedule and their own deadlines. The cycle has slowed down and extended over time. Used to be that some schools wouldn't take the February LSAT. Now almost all of them do take the February LSAT. And so February LSAT scores come back February 25th. January LSAT scores come back January 28th. And so you could take either January or February and still apply well in advance of any March deadlines. Even schools that have published March deadlines, those are sometimes soft and flexible. You can reach out to admissions and ask them, and they will often extend the deadline if you just ask. And so those deadlines are flexible, they're not fixed. And the reason for that is that they have no incentive to be too strict on those deadlines, because law schools do not get bonus points for having harsh deadlines or having early deadlines. Those are not the metrics on which they're evaluated. Law schools are evaluated only based on the highest LSAT scores and GPAs of their matriculating students. And that's the reason why law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores, but rather they only take the highest score on record into consideration, because that's what goes to the American Bar Association, which in turn is where US News pulls their data from for inclusion in the ever important US News Law School rankings. And so when you look at it from their perspective, when you applied to law school, doesn't matter. Whether you took the LSAT multiple times, doesn't matter. Whether you canceled a score, doesn't matter. And that's to Vanessa's question here. Vanessa is asking, welcome Vanessa. Vanessa's asking, does it hurt you as far as applications go if you have a canceled LSAT score? No, it does not hurt you, because law schools have no reason to care about a single cancellation or even 2 cancellations. If you've got 5 cancellations, of course, that might raise a red flag, and you might want to write an addendum to explain that. But you can. You say, I had tech issues. I had a bad proctor. I was sick that day. I had some anxiety. I didn't take it with accommodations and then later got accommodations. You can say any explanatory factor you could include. I probably wouldn't mention accommodations, by the way, because law schools have no right to know whether you got accommodations. So I misspoke there when I mentioned that last one. But the other ones, bad proctor, tech issues, you could certainly cite those as reasons for cancellation. And one or two cancellations, really no big deal. One or two retakes, really no big deal. If you take it even 4 or 5 times, totally fine. Again, the highest score is what matters. And by the way, the whole thing around is applying late a big deal? First of all, we have to define late, right? Because it used to be that applying in February or March was considered late. That's no longer the case. The cycle has extended over time, meaning that January and February are actually normal. They're kind of in the middle of the cycle now. So the cycle has slowed down over time. And the consequence of that is that it will take longer and longer to hear back from schools. And that's okay. Just be patient. Law schools have no reason to care about when you applied because they're not evaluated based on that metric. And there is still plenty of scholarship money available later in the cycle. Law schools know that more applicants will come along and they want to be able to offer you money in order to attract you to their school. I mean, think about it like this. So my oldest kid right now is 6. And let's say I give him $10 in allowance money. The first week, he might spend all $10. The first hour he sees a shiny new toy, he wants to get that toy, that's it. But a law school that's been around for decades and decades and decades, they might have learned from previous mistakes. They kind of know how the cycle is going to play out. They know when people are going to apply. They know that they should hold back and budget their money available for scholarships to see who else might come along. So if they know from past experience that strong applicants do come along later in the cycle, they're going to want to hold on to some of that money in their budget. Let's say they can offer 100 full rides to different applicants with strong numbers. They can say, okay, well, we're going to give out some money in September, some money in October, some in November, but we're going to save half of it for the new year because we know that new people might come along and we want to be able to offer them money to attract them to the school. In other words, law schools are not dumb. They've done this for decades and decades and decades. They know their incentives. They know that they want to have money available to offer strong applicants. And so they're going to save some of that scholarship money for you if you can apply in January, February, or even March with higher numbers. So January is not late. Taking the February LSAT is also not too late. It's always going to be better and more advantageous to you to apply to law school later with a higher LSAT score than earlier with a lower LSAT score. So applying in February, Iman, to your question here, it's not too late. I see Sapna is asking about the writing sample. Is this important? So the writing sample is more important than it used to be because of AI. Law schools cannot count as much on your application essays because they know that a lot of folks are using AI to help with their application essays. Even if they say not to, folks might do it anyway, and how are law schools really going to know? So the writing sample is their only unfiltered look at your true writing ability without filters, without the possibility of anyone or anything having helped you. But the writing sample still is not scored. And so for that reason, it still is less important than the scored portions of the LSAT. So I'd say until you have secured your goal LSAT score or above officially, I wouldn't give the writing sample much, if any, attention. So it's funny to me when someone says, I want to score a 170 plus, or I want to go to a T14. My practice test average is a 150 or a 160. Can you talk to me about the writing sample? And I'm like, I can, but I won't because it's not going to serve you. Let's get you your 170 plus and then talk writing sample. In a way, the writing sample becomes kind of a distraction or a procrastination tool from what really matters, which is the hard work of studying for the LSAT. And you can conquer the LSAT. It is doable. To your question, Armani here, Armani's asking, do you suggest an LSAT tutor for a big score increase? Yes, I definitely do. There are lots of different ways to study for the LSAT, but the best way, if you can swing it, is going for one-on-one support, because the thing is that When you're studying on your own, you don't know what you don't know. And so adding some expert guidance into the mix from someone who's done it before and gotten a top score themselves, it's going to make your path forward that much smoother. And if you've got more time than money, if you've got a year, then of course, no rush. You can try to slog it on your own. But if you're looking for support, then one-on-one support is the biggest and best way to maximize your score increase, especially in a relatively shorter period of time. And that's why I'm offering free LSAT tutoring to everybody out there watching this now or later. You can book a free one-on-one tutoring lesson with me personally through the link in my bio on TikTok, link below the video on YouTube. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. That's an open offer to anybody now or later who's looking for help. I can help you craft your personal action plan and give you some guidance on your LSAT prep journey going forward. Whenever you're taking the LSAT, whether it's in January, February, April, June, or beyond, happy to help you out. Got a question from Tara asking, got a 3.2 GPA, but a 170. Is it possible to get into a top 20 law school? Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, the 3.2 GPA is definitely going to hurt. The 170 LSAT will help to balance that out, though, so that's good at least. You might want to consider retaking, because if you could apply with a 173 or a 175, you would do even more to maximize your odds of getting in. But you can certainly shoot your shot. Those numbers are not terrible. And so you could just blanket the T20, apply to every, and by that I mean apply to every single one of the top 20 law schools. Is that a lot of work? Yes, it's a lot of application essays to write. You can reuse some of the same application essays for multiple schools, though, with a little bit of tweaking. And it will cost you a lot of money in application fees, but if you reach out to law schools, some of them will waive the application fees. All you've got to do is ask nicely. So a simple email that you copy, paste, and send to all 20 law schools, just a couple sentences, could save you thousands of dollars in application fees. So well worth making that ask and applying to a lot of schools. And I know that sounds crazy, but the more schools you apply to, the more offers of admission you will get, and the more scholarship money you will get as well, the more negotiation leverage you will have. Because the more schools you get into, and the more offers of scholarship money that you get, the more yeses you have, the more you can go to other schools and say, I'd really love to go to your school, but other school offered me more money, and that's a factor. Can you match or exceed that? If so, I'd love to go to your school instead. You ask nicely and politely, but you negotiate like the future lawyer that you are, and many schools will say yes. They will up their offers just from a single email. So well worth making that ask. Vanessa's asking, if I get a lower LSAT score but have a 4.0 GPA, am I okay? By lower LSAT score, I mean like a score of 157. So it's all relative, right? I mean, your GPA is amazing, Vanessa. Well done. A 4.0 GPA, you can barely ask for better than that. But we do want to get your LSAT score up. And when you ask, am I okay? It's all relative, right? So okay for what goal? Because there's a wide range of law schools. There's over 200 law schools, ABA-approved law schools in the US, and they all have different requirements in terms of LSAT scores and GPAs. You might be okay with a 157, but you would be a lot better with a 165 or a 170. And so my recommendation would be, let's get you the highest possible score on the January LSAT. And I know that you just recently joined the boot camp, and so you're in great hands here. We're going to give you your action plan, set you up with the coaching, and then we're going to get your score up as high as possible. But with intensive support over a period of 5 weeks, there's a lot we can do to improve your odds of getting in, getting significant scholarship money, and raising your score 10, 15, 20 points. And of course, that's not a promise or a guarantee, but it's possible when you give it your all in a short time frame and you've never had the personalized support before. We add that into the mix. There's usually a pretty quick score boost to be gained. There's going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit. And so I'm excited to see what we can do for you. And I'm glad that you're here. I'm happy to help you out. A 4.0 GPA is awesome. I'm really glad that you've got that, because it's a lot easier to retake the LSAT and boost up your LSAT score than it is to redo all of undergrad and boost your GPA. And your GPA is pretty fixed by now, right? If your GPA was a 3.0, we couldn't magically make it a 4.0. But if your LSAT's a 157, we can get it up 10, 15, 20 points. It's possible. And so Because you've already got the 4.0 GPA, that's the harder part to get up. We've now just got to boost your LSAT. And so if we could get your LSAT up 10, 15, 20 points or more, then like we can really write your own ticket. You can go to any law school you want to potentially. Not a promise, but it's a numbers game. And so if we just get your LSAT up higher, we can get you into a lot more schools, maximize your outcomes. Armani's asking, for a lower LSAT GPA, should you apply early for a better outcome? So if you've got a lower GPA, there's a couple things you want to do. Applying early helps, but even better is getting a higher LSAT score. So I would rather we get you a higher LSAT score to compensate for the GPA. And then if you're applying next cycle anyway, of course you can apply early. I think you were the guy who's applying. You're the guy who's applying next cycle anyway, so you're not in a rush. Excuse me. Excuse me, still getting over that cold. So because you're applying next fall anyway, you will be able to apply early. And that means that you can take the LSAT in the spring or in the summer. You can make any scores possible with 3 to 6 months of studying. And so we can get you a high LSAT score, and then you can apply the second applications open in the fall. So I really think you're in a great position here. And I would, all else being equal, want you to apply the second applications open, and you can because you've got time. Sapna is asking, my GPA's a 2.3 from 10 years ago. Okay, so if your GPA is old and it's low, it's not as big a deal as if it was low and it was recent. And I say that because law schools will discount your GPA the older it is because it doesn't reflect who you are today. So who you were at 20 is not who you are at 30, for example, right? And it's even more true the older that you are and the more time has passed since your undergrad. And so they will discount your GPA, and then they will, as that piece of the pie shrinks in importance, the work experience and LSAT score increase in relative importance. So we discount your GPA, we place more emphasis on your LSAT score, your work experience, and your application essays. And so your GPA is what it is. Not a whole lot you can do about it at this stage, but the higher LSAT score you can get, the stronger the application essays and the rec letters you can get, the more that will make up for it. So it is what it is. Not a whole lot you can do about it, but make everything else that much stronger to compensate. I'm just scanning through some other questions here in the chat. Feel free to keep them coming. I'll get to as many as I can. Rafi's asking, can I reuse the same personal statement for every school? Not really. But schools do have their own unique application essay prompts. So you want to make sure that you're actually answering the questions that they're asking. But you can reuse a lot of the same material. So we typically recommend writing one core personal statement, one core diversity/adversity statement, one core addendum if necessary to explain away, for example, a low undergraduate GPA, or if you have a character and fitness disclosure that you've got to write, you write one specific essay for each of those, and then you might tweak them slightly and specifically depending on the essay prompt of the individual school. More and more schools are writing their own unique essay prompts, in part because of the Supreme Court's ban on affirmative action. They had to redo their diversity statement prompts, for example, to comply with the ruling. And as a result of that, some of the prompts are a little bit different or they vary from school to school. So just keep that in mind to make sure that you are answering the specific prompt of the school. But you can reuse the same core idea or story. And there's not that much rewriting you have to do if you're clever about it. Relatedly, Glenn is asking, is an addendum necessary if my GPA dipped in one semester? It's not necessary, but if there's this one out of left field drop in a particular semester, then it might not be a bad idea just to explain what happened so that schools aren't wondering why. You never want to leave them with any unanswered question because that could be a red flag. So tell them why honestly, be concise, be matter of fact. Don't make excuses, but do explain in just a couple sentences. If you were sick, if you had a health issue, if you had a family emergency of some kind, if you had to work at the same time because of financial hardship, you could write a short addendum talking about that. Don't overly stress about it though. Ideally, you do want to show an upward trend in your transcript. You want to end on a positive note, better to go from low to high than from high to low. But yeah, I would probably write something if you think the numbers or the difference is severe enough that it would raise a question, then you do want to talk about it. Ben's asking, how important is work experience? So I'll say this, work experience is not as important as LSAT and GPA or your essays. The order of importance in admissions is LSAT score first and foremost, then your GPA, then your application essays, then everything else. And the reason that work experience in particular doesn't matter that much is because not everybody has it. Think of the so-called KJDs. Those are folks who are going directly from undergrad into law school, and they have not worked at all in between. So for that reason, they never would have had the chance or the opportunity to get work experience. And of course, they might have had a summer job or something or an internship, but in terms of time in the workforce, they wouldn't have time to collect that. And so law schools can't penalize them for it directly. I will say that having some work experience could certainly help, though, especially if it's law related, because then you can show law schools that you have real world exposure to the practice of law. Let's say you've worked as a paralegal. You've got an exposure to real world attorneys. You see what law is like, that it's a lot different than what you would see on a show like Suits, for example, right? So they know that your exposure to law is not limited to just pop culture representations, but you really know what actual legal work experience is like. So if you have it, talk about it. If you don't, no big deal. From a purely admissions standpoint, it's better to not have the work experience and have a higher LSAT score than to work as a paralegal and have a lower LSAT. So don't get the work experience at the expense of the LSAT. Don't get it at the expense of, say, you don't want to tank your GPA just to get the work experience. But if you're not sure whether law is right for you, then yeah, I would work for a bit just to see what it's like. And that could be an internship only. Doesn't have to be a full-time job for a few years. Even just one summer might be enough. I actually worked as a paralegal for 2 summers and got a bit of exposure to the world of law. And I saw that it's not always that exciting. It could be literally doc review, just reading through hundreds of pages of emails sent internally at a company, for example. But it's not always glamorous, but there could be a needle in the haystack worth looking for. So yeah, get the work experience if you think you would like to get it, to get the exposure, but you certainly don't need to get it. Wes is asking, is it bad if my resume is 1 page? Not at all. In fact, that's a good thing. You want your resume to be only 1 page. Oh, I see my dog is stirring in the background there. Yeah, so a resume, only 1 page, that is the goal. You don't want it to be too long, especially if you're younger, because you want to show that you can make difficult decisions with regard to editing, and you can make tough choices to consolidate your experience into fewer bullet points, make the tough choices, cutting certain sections, for example. And so, yes, I would try to consolidate to 1 page unless you've got a really fantastic reason to make it longer, like you got a Fulbright scholarship or fellowship and you needed to explain the work that you did out there in the field. But ideally, limiting it to 1 page. So thanks all for joining, folks. I'm going to sign off now because I need to rest my voice a little bit, but I appreciate you all joining. I'll be back on tomorrow, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. If you found this helpful, please spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. Really appreciate your support. I'll see you all tomorrow, same time, same place. See you all then. Thanks for joining.